Can we just turn our attention back to politics for the moment? It's been an eventful week for the ANC, an eventful weekend, and it's going to be an eventful year. Well, the ANC, first of all, in Mpumalanga, wrapping up its much-anticipated conference over the weekend. We'll talk about that. And then we have to discuss the step-aside resolution. It's come to the fore yet again following Bathabile Dlamini's perjury conviction. So there's a lot to unpack, and luckily Professor Sethulego Matebes has had a very strong cup of coffee as he joins us this morning. Prof, good morning to you. There's an awful amount to talk through. I see you laughing as I talk about the strong coffee. We're going to need it. Can we talk first of all, before Mpumalanga, step aside for Bathabile Dlamini? Should she be out or should she be in? Which way do you think the ruling party is going to go?
It's very difficult to predict the affairs of the African National Congress these days because the rules of engagement have changed. The ANC should never have had even a step-aside rule. I mean, any organization worth its salt will have disciplinary procedures, and if you are facing serious charges, and perjury, for me, it's a serious charge. Unfortunately, Mayor Bathabile Dlamini should have been suspended a long time ago or step aside. But I predict that there will be a call made for her to voluntarily step aside because she has been found guilty in a court of law, even if there has been an option of a fine. It has reputational damages for the African National Congress if she has to serve in any high positions within the African National Congress.
But do you think the president of the ANC has the teeth if Bathabile Dlamini, Prof, doesn't willingly, voluntarily step aside? Do you think he'll then step in as the CEO, the leadership of the organization, and say, no, it's time we use someone as an example, it's time for you to go? Do you think he will make that call?
He will not make that call. I mean, he had a glorious opportunity yesterday at a Mpumalanga conference where he said the province should have a relook at the step-aside rule. Now, if you are a chief executive officer, you come in and say, but we cannot allow that. This does not make sense. And Mpumalanga is setting a very dangerous precedent, and perhaps a good precedent according to the ANC rules. And one of the questions that many people later ask members of the African National Congress, that simply means that even the suspended Secretary General of the organization may just stand to be elected for some positions up until his case is concluded. And I don't understand. These are serious charges of murder. Once again, a huge reputational dent on the African National Congress. But the president comes on the podium, he does not give directions, he throws it back to the province, and that is the problem of the African National Congress.
There's other problems for the African National Congress as well, never mind the ANC elective conference later in the year. Everyone's going to start watching, Prof, what happens at these provincial conferences at the moment. So let's talk for a moment, if we can, about Mpumalanga electing Mandla Ndlovu. He's the new man in charge. To remind viewers, he secured 440 out of the 718 votes. Lucky in the NISA getting 278 as well. Is Mandla Ndlovu the man to fill the void and try to take over the chaos and stop the chaos we've seen in Mpumalanga since 2017? Is he the right guy?
For me, he got an overwhelming support. I mean, more than 278 votes, more than his rival. But fact of the matter is, what I really like about most of the Mpumalanga leaders, it's each time when the journalists were asking them of infighting and all that, there was one message to say, we are tired of this infighting. We want to take the province forward and we want to take this organization forward. It's very difficult to now predict because, I mean, politics, 1 minute, it's too long in politics. So you can never predict how things will evolve or how we will, chatter his way around some of the very difficult issues that he will have to confront in its unifying the Mpumalanga province. But I do believe that he has the requisite political experience, and he has been in the African National Congress for a long time, and that may come in good in trying to consolidate, the branches and, the African National Congress in the Mpumalanga province.
Apart from trying to consolidate and strengthen the ANC in Mpumalanga as well, let's not forget there are also ordinary non-ANC members that are going to look to him for leadership, and it's not a good start, is it, Prof, when you look at the fact that you also have murder-accused Mandla Msibi being elected provincial treasurer as well, and Msibi wasn't even at the conference. That's already one of the issues that Ndlovu is going to have to deal with. So it's going to be rough running right from the get-go.
Yeah, no, he will have to broach very complex issues. I mean, it's not only about the renewal within the African National Congress. At the end of the day, these provincial structures and local government structures are there to serve the interests of the people, and he needs to get, the ball running in terms of providing adequate services to the residents, the citizens of Mpumalanga, but also at the same time having its eye on, supporting whoever, but come the elective conference of the African National Congress.
So what should he be doing in a case with his provincial secretary, treasurer general, being a murder accused and stepping aside from the ANC last year? Should he, as the new ANC Mpumalanga leadership, should he ask for that step aside resolution to apply in this case for his treasurer general?
Jared, I just hope that some of us can get an opportunity to talk positive issues about the African National Congress. This, for me, it's a huge travesty of justice. I do not understand what the African National Congress is trying to reach. And one question that I may ask is that what if the provincial treasurer's case lasts for more than 3 years or 4 years? Does that now mean that nobody is going to occupy that position? Once you have stepped aside, that simply means that you cannot contest any position. But this is once again indicative of the decisions that politicians take to suit their own personal interests. And unfortunately, the organization, more than 100 years, is still afraid to do the basics, to take decisive action, decisive decisions that will not only reinvigorate, processes within the organization, but will once again also strengthen the organization, which at the end of the day are, most of them are our public representatives, and will also enhance service delivery in this country.
And I'm sure that there are things that people would like to talk about, Prof, from a positive perspective from the ANC, but unfortunately it's these issues within the party that we have to unpack before we can start talking about moving forward, isn't it? And one of the issues, and this is where the problem always is with President Ramaphosa, he wears two hats, doesn't he? One is as the ANC president, one is as the state president. We all know that, of course. And one of the issues that we picked up on yesterday, speaking to the president outside the conference, was Operation Dudula. There just doesn't seem to be enough teeth, a big enough bite when it comes to how Ramaphosa is handling Operation Dudula. Why do you think the president is so timid and so tentative in handling Dudula? What do you think is going on? What's he worried about?
No, I don't think that the president is worried, but he's a very cautious approach to issues. But I think for me, and I've said it, and I was taken on that, to say we have the best president, because if I listen to all these other leaders, the so-called RET forces, I'm actually shudder to think some of them used to be our leaders for so long, because some of the things that they mention and pronounce, make public pronouncement on, are actually very shocking. And that gives us insight as to what we can expect in future. And here we've got a president, yes, with all his flaws. I strongly believe that he is the advocate for at least, advancing the best interest of South Africans. But there are moments where I strongly believe that he needs to take decisive action. I mean, South Africa is a criminal state, and we've seen several times how the police minister is denying that. South Africans are trapped within their own country in terms of crime. Criminals have taken over our country, and yet absolutely no decisive actions are taken against a minister which I strongly believe that has not been, effectively dealing with some of these issues. But at the end of the day, perhaps we will see a different President Ramaphosa if he does ascend for a second time to the podium as ANC president and president of South Africa.
I'm curious, Prof, allow me to go back to the comment you made about President Ramaphosa being the best president, and then in the very next sentence you and I are talking about not taking decisive action, saying the right things, but not necessarily doing anything about it. What would you make of that critique?
Well, thanks for that question. Gareth, you should understand, sometimes it's very difficult. Some of us already predicted that it's going to be very difficult for President Ramaphosa, even way before he was elected, to do what he wants to do because of, having career politicians fighting for their life within the African National Congress. And it's very unfortunate. I've stated it often on many various platforms that the president has made his money. He is a very shrewd leader, but at the end of the day, something just tells us that sometimes taking a very cautious approach to certain issues is also sending a very wrong message, and that is why we've seen. I thought by now we would have seen that some of these other very, divisive forces within the African National Congress would have retracted, but they wouldn't do that because maybe for them they do interpret the way the president approaches certain issues as him not being strong enough, and that's why they are exploiting that situation. And unfortunately, at the end of the day, this is bleeding the African National Congress, and it is leading to a dysfunctional state because on various fronts, there's a lot of things that is going well in this country, but there are also things that on a daily basis, you just ask yourself, but what is happening here if you look at the bloated government structures and even the personnel that we do have in our public institutions, and to ask questions as to why do we not have, effective policing dealing with drugs and the high rate of murder in South Africa.
It's going to be very interesting to see all the provincial elections later in the year as we lead up to the ANC elective conference. And, Prof, even as you talk about beyond that, the state side, the policing, the vigilantism as well, and whether or not there's going to be a second term for Cyril Ramaphosa. Professor Sethulego Matebes, as always, it's great to have you on eNCA. I mean, there really is so much I could speak to the Prof about, but it does come down to the step-aside resolution again. The reason I brought it up is we had the issue in Mpumalanga over the weekend, the provincial treasurer, and that step-aside being put into place last year. Then you've got Bathabile Dlamini and whether it's going to happen there. And this is what we've got to watch so closely.